guys, welcome back to my channel. I was gonna say,
or if you're new here, welcome.
But I think everyone is new here since this is only my second video here on BookTube. And I'm really excited because it's gonna be my first monthly wrap-up video. And I am excited, but also a little nervous to try and recap all of these books that I read the past couple of months. I'm doing a 2-month wrap-up just because the past 2 months I was actually traveling in Japan and I got some pretty good reads in while I was away. I use Libby, which if you didn't know, Libby is the app that you can use to borrow library books. And I put a ton of holds on Libby and they all became available kind of around the same time. So yeah, I am just really excited to just talk books with you. I have been just dying to talk about these books. So let's get started. I guess too, one thing I want to mention is that in January, February, March, I just went on a complete Sarah J. Maas binge with my friend Mia. We have been buddy reading ACOTAR and then we got into Throne of Glass. And I did not time it right because I was about to have to lug the tandem read, which looks like this. I was about to lug these two behemoths of books to Japan, plus Kingdom of Ash. The last book is like 1,000 pages. Love this series, but was just not willing to take up a precious weight in real estate in my bags to Japan. And I just wanted to preface that just because coming off of like a very high stakes fantasy book series for like months and months, I just really went into April just wanting just a lighthearted, heartwarming, happy reads, as low stakes as possible, basically. And that is exactly what I got. I'm so excited to share this list of books I read in April and May because I dipped my toes in a new genre and I also found some amazing 5-star reads. So I started off April again, really wanting to get into something that was just lighthearted and heartwarming. I discovered cozy fantasy, which is just low stakes but high fantasy. So my first step into this genre was Bone Dust and Bookshops by Travis Baldree. I finished that book so quick because it was just so cute, so heartwarming. I really enjoyed everything about it. Bone Dust and Bookshops, if you didn't know, is actually the prequel to Legends and Lattes. If you look up the genre cozy fantasy, Legends and Lattes is always up there as like the #1 example of what a cozy fantasy read is. And Legends and Lattes really popularized the genre in recent years. And I've heard a lot of people say that cozy fantasy is just a little too slow for them, which I completely understand. But for me, I loved being transported to this fantasy world and just seeing these creatures just living their lives and doing like really mundane things. Bone Dust and Bookshops, it follows an orc named Viv who is trying to start her career as a mercenary, but right at the beginning of the book, she actually suffers from an injury that sidelines her and makes her have to step aside and recover in this really sleepy coastal town. Throughout the book, you're kind of following her as she's meeting new people in the town, making new friends, and she stumbles into this bookshop and ends up discovering the love of secondhand books and reading. One of the things that I just absolutely gravitated towards in this book is just all the talk about the love of reading and having friends to talk about books with. It's basically felt like I was there in the room watching these friends just talk about books, the love of books, discovering new books, discussing what the books are about and like what their takeaways are. There is like a little bit of stakes, but the stakes are again low. I just really loved being in this book where the people shared my love of reading. I gave this book 4 stars. I would totally recommend it if you want to get into the genre after Bookshops and Bone Dust, which by the way, I am realizing now that I have probably been switching Bookshops and Bone Dust and just saying it just different ways throughout this entire review. So please forgive me. So that book just really got me hooked into the cozy fantasy world and I just wanted more of it. And so the next book I read was actually The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. And I loved this book so much. When I read it, I actually borrowed it on Libby and just was highlighting it a bunch. There were so many quotes that I loved and I just knew that afterwards I was going to need to buy a physical copy. So Yeah, what can I say about this book? If you didn't know what The House in the Cerulean Sea is about, it follows this 40-year-old caseworker named Linus who works for the department in charge of magical youths. His job is basically to go to these government-sanctioned orphanages and evaluate whether or not the children are being taken care of based on these like set of guidelines and rule books that he has. And Linus is just this type of person who just is a rule follower. He does not color outside the lines. He basically is just the type of person who just clocks in and out of work and then goes home and just lives a very solitary life and for fun reads the rule book just to freshen up on like what rules he needs to follow and base his evaluations off of. And because of that, because he's such a good rule follower and good little employee, he actually gets tapped by upper management to be assigned to this very classified case where he goes to the house in the Cerulean Sea and evaluate this orphanage, which is filled with some of the most dangerous kids on Earth. His job is to evaluate whether or not they're likely to bring about the end of the world. This book is so well written. TJ Klune and the way he writes his characters is just masterful. The characters in this book are just so quirky and have such big personalities, and it's witty and it hits on found family and not letting other people's expectations of who you are dim your dreams, and to not let what you are determine who you become. And I honestly just can't say enough about how much I love this book. It teaches empathy. It teaches not judging a book by its cover. It just... 5 out of 5 for sure. One of my top reads of the year, I think. Okay, so after House in the Cerulean Sea, I wanted to change it up a bit and switch over to another genre that was still lighthearted, but out of the fantasy world. And I picked up Abby Jimenez's new book, Just for the Summer. And I'm not gonna lie, I was so excited to read this, partially because this cover is beautiful. Like, it's so fun and so happy. I just had to read this book immediately when it was released. Just for the Summer is actually a part of an interconnected standalone series called Part of Your World. And what interconnected standalone means is that there are 3 books in the series. It's Part of Your World, Yours Truly, and then Just for the Summer. You can read these books by themselves, not having read any of the other books, and you'd be totally fine. However, there are characters that connect to each other in each of the books. And for this series in particular, I actually do recommend reading it in order. Part of Your World, Yours Truly, and then Just for the Summer. I, however, did not do that. I was too excited to read this book when it came out. I already read Part of Your World back in December, I think. November, December. Loved it. And when this came out, I completely skipped Yours Truly and went to this because of how pretty the cover is. I know. I know. Regardless, again, I think this is just proof that you do not need to read all the books in the series to understand what's happening in this. But when you get to the ending, she kind of wraps it up all nicely in a bow. So after reading this, I was like, okay, I really need to read Yours Truly because I want to see where certain things come from. So yeah, if you're going to read this series, don't do what I did or read it in order. This book follows Justin and Emma, who are both cursed with the same thing, where whenever they date someone, after they break up, that person immediately finds their one true love, their soulmate. And it just feels like they're destined to forever help other people, but not themselves. And so when Emma sees Justin post in a Reddit thread about his curse, she immediately DMs him. And after a few back and forths, they jokingly talk about how maybe if they date each other, they'll cancel their curses out and they will both go on to find their one true loves once they break up. And obviously that ends up happening, and they start dating with the intention of eventually breaking up. So I give this book 4.5 stars, and honestly, I think if I reread this again, I would give it a 5-star. I don't remember why I docked it 0.5 points, but when I looked back at my review, I wrote 4.5. So I don't know where the 0.5 went because I just remember absolutely having such fun reading this. What I really liked about this book is that the relationship actually seemed very mature. There was great communication between both parties. It was open and honest communication about expectations and just what they were feeling. There was no miscommunication, which is something that really bothers me in a lot of romance books, is just, if you just talked, this would be totally fine. This book did not have that. Great communication. It also talks about deeper topics than just like a fluffy romance book on the surface. Both characters actually have some family stuff going on the side, but even though they both have family things going on, and having these characters being able to talk about things was just really refreshing, and I loved that. I also loved Justin as a book boyfriend. He is 5 out of 5. He is just the perfect example of if he wanted to, he would. And again, this just felt like a very mature relationship. And yeah, I love this book. 4.5 out of 5. And then the next book I read was a book I read on my Kindle again because I was actually traveling to Japan and just completely beasted through this book on the plane ride there. I got into Legends and Lattes, which is the first book in the Legends and Lattes series. Again, Bookshops and Bone Dust is the prequel to Legends and Lattes, and my Hold on Libby finally was released to me, so I got to read the first book, and so good. It had the same feel as Bookshops and Bone Dust, which I loved. And if you didn't know, Legends and Lattes follows Viv again, but it's further along in her timeline and career as a mercenary. She's actually retiring, and she wanted to open up a coffee shop in this small town that has actually never heard of coffee. It just follows her life as she's opening this new coffee shop, again, meeting new friends and just teaching the townspeople about coffee and lattes and just creating this community space for them. Like the prequel, there is like an underlying like something happening, but again, it's low stakes. I gave this book 4 stars. It was so cozy, heartwarming. I love the characters. I love the world, and I'm super excited that there's actually going to be a sequel. I think it's being worked on right now, so there's no date that it's going to be released, but when it is released, I will be picking it up to read because I just love the series, and I think it's another series that, yes, I read it on my Kindle. However, I will be purchasing a physical copy because I just love the world and could totally see myself rereading it, especially in the fall, which I feel like cozy fantasy is just the perfect genre for the fall season. And the next on my list is another book that I read on my Kindle, just to continue kind of the cozy fantasy lightheartedness. The next book I read was actually, it is not cozy fantasy, but it's a romance with magical elements. I guess it's like magical realism. I don't know what that genre is, but it is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. And can I tell you how much I love Ashley Poston's writing? It's just so lyrical, and each of her books are just so unique and original. So Ashley Poston is actually the author of The 7-Year Slip, which, hold on, I'm gonna grab it for you. She is the author of The 7-Year Slip, which if you're in the book community, you've probably seen this book everywhere, seen a bunch of people talking about it. The 7-Year Slip was just such a surprise for me because if I was judging a book by its cover, I would have been like, the writing is just so beautiful. I love her writing style. It just feels like, what is it? It's like a massage for my brain almost to read her writing. And The Dead Romantics, how to explain this book? Because this is like, if you hear this explanation, you're going to be like, what? Okay, bear with me as I try to explain Dead Romantics. So The Dead Romantics is a story that follows Florence Day, who is a ghostwriter for one of the most popular romance authors, who is a recluse and has just been in the business for a long time. So because of that, she was looking for a ghostwriter to help her release her next novels. But Florence, unfortunately, went through a really traumatic, awful breakup and just no longer believes in love. She literally thinks romance is dead. See these themes? She is having just such a hard time getting started on this next romance book that she owes her editor. She just doesn't believe in happy endings, and so every time she tries to write one, it just ends in something just not very happy. But when she goes to meet her new editor, who turns out to be this really handsome man, he just completely shuts her down when she asks for an extension and just really tells her she needs to stick to her deadline, as Florence is just freaking out, about to give up, and is just like wondering where her career is going to go after she fails to turn in this book. She unfortunately gets a really sad call from her family asking her to come back because her father passed away. And so She has to go back to this hometown that she has been back to in like 10 years. She has really bad memories in this hometown, and yeah, that's why she's been avoiding it. But when she arrives in her hometown, she sees the ghost of her editor. And they're both kind of looking at each other like, what? Just really startled to see each other. And the story just follows along as they're trying to figure out why he's there, what's his unfinished business. And it's just, this story was so good. It was so unique. And I feel like telling you any more would just be too much because you just have to read it. It's hard, like I said, it's really hard to explain this book because I feel like just reading the back, it's like, yeah, that's the premise of the story. But I feel like just reading the back of this book, I would probably write it off and just not like, I'd be like, okay, whatever. I mean, it's kind of similar to 7 Year Slip, where when I read the back, I was kind of confused by like, I don't understand like what this concept is at all. But then as you read it and as the story unfolds and you learn more about what is actually going on, and you get more details about her past, his past, and you kind of find out how they both kind of have unfinished business. I don't know. It just, overall, I gave this book 5 out of 5. I loved the story. I had such a good time with it. I like the characters. I really like the depth of the topics that were talked about. This is another book that, yes, I read on Kindle, but I am 100% buying a physical copy because I just love Ashley Poston so much. And if you didn't know, she has a new release coming out at the end of June, which I am super excited about. It's like one of my top anticipated reads of the year is that book. Whew, all right. I feel like I've been talking for forever. So the next book that I read was, I finally got to read the second book in this series, Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. Again, part of the Interconnected Standalone series, A Part of Your World. And Yours Truly, 5 stars. I gave Part of Your World 4 stars, Just for the Summer 4.5, but this one, 5 stars. This book follows Brianna, who works at this hospital and runs into the new doctor named Jacob, and her first impressions of him were just not good. He just came off really standoffish and just like his just communication skill, it just was not there. Her impression of him was just gross. Like, I don't want nothing to do with this guy. He seems like kind of but this book is written in dual POV, which actually, now that I think of it, the other books in the series are also dual POVs, which means you get 2 points of views. So you get Brianna's point of view, but then when you get to Jacob's point of view, you learn that he can sometimes come off that way because he deals with just really crippling anxiety. And he knows that he made a terrible first impression on Brianna, and he decides to write her a handwritten letter because he just feels like he can better express himself when he has the time to really think about it and write it down versus just being on the spot in person. And they end up just exchanging letters back and forth. Brianna is going through a really hard time in her personal life. Her brother is actually really sick and looking for a kidney donor. And Jacob, on the other hand, also has his own family drama happening. So the letters between them actually end up being a bright spot for both of them. And they end up in this like fake dating situation that ends up leading to more. Such a good read. I really enjoyed both main characters. I loved Brianna, and I feel like Jacob in particular, I just related to him so much because for me, like a lot of people don't know, I'm an introvert. I sometimes I feel like can be very extrovert facing because when I know I have to be in a room full of people, I feel like I can turn on a switch. But the switch only lasts for so long, and then afterwards I just feel like I need to refuel my batteries. Or even if it comes to like big social situations, I always feel like I need to just really hype myself up. And I feel like the way that anxiety was talked about and written about in this book was just so spot on. There are just some things that like Jacob mentioned that he does that I realize I also do, but never associated doing that with my anxiety as like a coping mechanism. Having a character that I so wholly related to and understood, it just made me feel seen a little bit. And I feel like that in particular is probably the huge driving force of why I gave this book a 5 stars, no question, because there is a part in the book where there is some really big miscommunication, and I just remember it bugging me, but apparently it didn't bug me enough to not want to immediately give this a 5 star after finishing the book completely. So Abby Jimenez, one of my new favorite romance authors for sure. I definitely want to read more of her books, and again, yours truly is another book that I want to pick up a physical copy for because I just heard it so much. All right, so moving on to May. Now, April was again just lots of lighthearted, fluffy. I just wanted to step into May with a book that had a little more edge to it. So I picked up a mystery thriller called Don't Believe It by Charlie Donnelly, and I went into this book completely blind, didn't look up any reviews for it. It just happened to be available on Libby, so I said, okay, let's do it. This book follows a true crime docuseries which is being filmed in real time over a span of 12 weeks, where we are trying to figure out if Grace actually did kill her boyfriend on spring break overseas, or is she a victim of horrible police work and terrible circumstances? This book is written in multiple POVs, one of them being Sydney Ryan's, who is the filmmaker for this docuseries. Sydney Ryan actually got a letter from Grace, who has been in prison for 10 years, and was just reaching out to her to beg her to do this docuseries and try to prove her innocence as like a last-ditch effort to free herself from this prison. We're following the series as they are finding more evidence, trying to figure out who done it. Did she actually do it? Is she innocent? Who else are the players here? I gave this book 3.75 because I had so much fun reading the book, but I felt like there were points where things were being over-explained. Like, I get that we had to kind of understand why the evidence didn't make sense in certain scenarios, but I found myself just briefly just like skimming over certain things and just trying to move on. But other than that, I absolutely did not get the ending correct. Like, I'd always try to guess the end of mysteries, and this one I just did not. I was totally off. And there was a moment in the book where I actually had like a jump scare moment where it was so creepy, I actually like audibly gasped. So yeah, 3.75 out of 5. I 100% recommend this book if you love true crime docs. All right, so after being thoroughly creeped out by Don't Believe It, I immediately wanted to jump back into a cozy fantasy book and ended up reading Welcome to the Fae Cafe, another blind read for me where I did not look up any reviews. I did not even read the synopsis of what the book was even about. I just thought the cover of the book was just so cute, and I don't know. I just saw the title and was like, yep, I'm just gonna read it. Okay, so this is another cozy fantasy book about a girl named Kate who accidentally kills a guy because he was being rude in a coffee shop. That moment leads to 4 Fae assassins coming into the human world to seek revenge on Kate for the death of their friend. But things go horribly wrong, and they end up having to blend in with the human society and end up having to help Kate open her new coffee shop and run it. And yeah, so honestly, if I had read that as the description of the story, I probably wouldn't have picked up this book. But honestly, this book wasn't that bad. Like, I thought it was fun. It was definitely cozy. There were cute moments, but I just felt like the writing just wasn't like my cup of tea. And I felt like there were moments that were just overly cheesy for just cheesy purposes. And don't get me wrong, I love a good cheeseball romance book, but when it's done well. And this one unfortunately just didn't hit the mark for me. But again, I actually did have fun reading it. It took me a long time to get through the book. I think because just the writing and the pacing of the book just wasn't wasn't aligned with me. But I did have a fun time reading it. And I think that there were some really cute, mundane moments that I really enjoyed because, again, that's what I love about the cozy fantasy genre is just getting to see these like fantasy creatures doing mundane things. I ended up rating this 3 stars. Would I recommend it? I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things where if you love the genre, maybe give it a chance. So the next book that I read was the Bromance Book Club, which is the first in the Bromance Book Club series. This book totally took me by surprise. I saw some booktubers reading it and just decided to give it a shot. I feel like after Welcome to the Fae Cafe and how slow it was, I just wanted something that was still lighthearted, but had a little bit like of a better pace. And Bromance Book Club is a dual POV book that follows the story of Gavin, a pro baseball player, and his wife, Thea, who are having some marriage troubles. And then when Gavin finds out the secret, he just reacts so terribly to it, and it really puts a strain on his relationship with Thea and ultimately leads to her asking him for a divorce. But when his pro baseball teammates hear about his marriage troubles, they take him under their wing and invite him into their secret romance book club where they read romance books geared towards women to learn how to better communicate with women and better understand what do women actually look for in romance and in love. It's kind of funny. They use like a steamy Regency romance book as like an example to help Gavin learn how to better communicate with Thea and how to fix their relationship. And they use that book as kind of a reference to coach Gavin as to like how to be more romantic and how to be a better communicator and express his feelings. This book was so entertaining and so wholesome. It was so cute seeing these like alpha pro baseball players just really swooping in and helping their friend work on his marriage. It was not broy at all. The book surprised me because it just had way more depth than I expected. Like the way that Gavin and Thea are talking about working through their marriage and just the way that the author writes about the intricacies of marriage and really working on a relationship that you're trying to salvage. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I had such a fun time reading it and would definitely recommend. Woo! All right. We're at the last and final book in this April and May wrap up. I feel like I've been talking for forever. I am so sorry. I am so excited to talk about this next book because it is the novella companion to one of my favorite reads of the year this year, Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I'm gonna go grab the book. Okay, I swear I'm gonna get better at preparing for these wrap-ups, but Powerless. Do you see these tabs? I ate this book up. It was so good. Lauren Roberts, queen. She just does banter and tension and slow burn romance so well. There is no spice in this book. This book is just, it's the banter, it's the talking that really just is so well done. One of my favorite books of the year for sure. And Powerful is the novella. It actually follows Adina, who is Peyton's best friend, and Peyton is the main protagonist in this book. And it follows Adina and shows what she's been up to as Peyton has been going through the trials in this book. And the trials that are happening in this book is very Hunger Game-esque. So if you liked Hunger Games, but anyways, Powerful, it's book 1.5 in the Powerless series because you have to read Powerless first before you get to Powerful. And just knowing all the stuff that happens in Powerless and then reading this book, it is both so romantic and so heartbreaking. It is a short novella and it is actually, like, I don't know if you can see, but the size is smaller than Powerless. And I actually thought that it would bother me that the books were 2 different sizes, but I actually love the way this book fit in my hands. And it kind of makes sense that this book in general is just short and sweet and small and so I gave this a 4.5 out of 5. And my only critique is I wish this book were longer. Like if this book were if we just got a full book just on Adina and Mac, this would be 100% a 5-star. I was a little worried about this book because I loved Powerless so much that I was worried that my expectations were too high for Lauren Roberts and her writing. I have no worries anymore. This just made me so much more excited for Reckless, Powerless's sequel that is being released on July 2nd, the day before my birthday. I am so excited now because Lauren Roberts' writing, once again, banter, tension, so good. If you are looking for a romantasy series and one that's not like super long yet, this one, for sure, 1000% Powerless. So those were all the books that I read in April and May. And to sum it all up, I read 4 cozy fantasy books, 4 romance books, 1 mystery thriller book, and 1 romantasy book. So 10 books in total. And I got into 1 new genre, which was cozy fantasy, which obviously I absolutely loved. And I had 3 5-star reads. So yeah, I had a very successful 2 months of reading, but now I want to hear from you guys. Like, what have you been reading? What have been your current favorite reads? Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you guys and hear your thoughts about things. All right, well, I will see you guys next time. Bye.